Hey, David, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi, Brian. Thanks for having me. I'm Dave Emerson. I'm 55 years old. I've been in the industry in transportation and logistics since I was 17, 18 years old. Like as Paul McCartney's mum said to him, she's still waiting for him to get a proper job.
Yeah.
My mum still says the same to me. So yeah, I'm co-founder of a business called Seco Logistics. We're a global supply chain logistics business involved in. We started out as a primary transportation, air freight, sea freight business, and then very quickly in the last 10 years have morphed into cross-border e-commerce fulfillment, as well as all the primary services. And Seco was a US business that was founded in the late 70s in Chicago. And then me and my partners started the company outside the US in 2003.
Yeah.
So we kind of did a deal with the guys that founded the business. They did the US, and me and my partners, we focused on the rest of the world.
Rest of the world.
So
Cool.
so we still, yeah, it sounds pretty grand, but we started in the UK, and then we basically did UK, Europe, Asia, China, Australia, South Africa. Yeah, so we've got about 120 offices in 40 countries.
Holy smokes.
Yeah,
What's the
pretty
sales
big.
team look like?
So yeah, interesting. So in the US, we have about 80 full-time B2B salespeople at all levels across. So we work in kind of verticals and products. So we have kind of our e-com product, we have our freight forwarding product, then we have kind of our high-tech kind of business, med tech. So each of those has their own salespeople attached to it, and at various levels. So we go from inside sales, literally right up to enterprise. And I look after kind of all the sales, everything outside the US, basically,
Cool.
across all the verticals and all the levels, really.
And who do the reps call on within the company?
So it's changing. It used to be when I was a boy, you were going around the back of the warehouse.
Yep.
To the guy doing the trucking, and the guy that did the freight was generally the guy or the girl that was in some porter cabin at the end of the warehouse.
I was that guy at one time.
Really?
Yeah.
No way.
Yep.
No way, really. Yeah, so that was how it was. And there's still a bit of that. But it generally is, obviously, supply chain and logistics has moved further and further up the growth agenda, if you like, of businesses, and they've realized how important it is.
Right.
It really, now it can be everything from CEO of a medium-sized business right the way down through, head of logistics, head of transport, chief supply chain officer, chief logistics officer, all of this kind of stuff. But pretty much generally always trying to speak to the budget holder, because with transportation and logistics, typically, there's always an influence type sell on the bigger global deals, but typically you want to be talking to them as any B2B rep, I'm sure, would say. You want to talk to the guy that makes the decision, or the girl.
And I got to believe that the hardest part is differentiating yourselves, because that customer wants to commoditize you. Is that
Totally
true? Yeah.
It's massively true, and it's, our industry and our business has really been through a massive commoditization shift in the last 15 to 20 years, and it's the biggest thing that we focus on with our salespeople is the different, and I think that helped us with having a startup experience, because when we started in the UK, there were 5 of us in the whole company, in the whole of the UK. Now we've got 350 people just in the UK.
Wow.
But it was all about, and I came from corporate sales from a big company based in Houston in Texas, and I was running the Europe business, and I came from the big corporate thing where I didn't need to differentiate myself. We just showed up and we generally got work.
Service,
Where relationship, service, and size, and that kind of thing. And there's a saying in our industry that nobody ever got fired for picking DHL. Right? Because does what it says on the tin,
Right.
So differentiating ourselves is really a hard thing to do. But we've been lucky that, or fortunate that our story has included some great differentiators, particularly in terms of tech and how we account manage our customers and we take them on what we call a supply chain journey,
Yeah.
helping to transform their business as we go. Whereas a lot of our competitors still focus on that kind of how much, where do you ship
Cost.
from? Where
Right.
do you ship to? How much do you want to pay?
Right.
And we've made a big thing that if we try to play in that market, we'll get murdered.
Race to the bottom. Yeah.
Race to the bottom. And it's interesting. There's still parts of our business where you have to be competitive.
Of course.
But if you always want to be the lowest cost provider, you're just going to get commoditized and you're finished.
And what do your customers typically care about? I mean, how do they get rewarded? What are their concerns? What are their fears? I got to believe they're more fear oriented than they are desire oriented.
It's totally fear driven
Yeah.
in as much as that obviously you're and it depends on the type of solution we're serving. So if we run the warehouse for a customer and we're doing their e-commerce fulfillment and they are an e-commerce business and that's all they do, and we run their site,
Yep.
and we run their shipping, and we mess up, we shut them down. We can shut
Right.
them down. We can put companies out of business, and we've seen it. Luckily, not with us, but some of our competitors have implemented business, taken it on, got it wrong, and almost put companies out of business. And then the other element of fear is on the freight forwarding side in terms of delays and cost, and nobody wants to be paying over the top.
Right.
Everyone wants to think they're paying the lowest cost. And I guess in the last kind of few years, in terms of the way that e-commerce has impacted the supply chain, the fear has been about having stock in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Because that's been the biggest fear of, with fast fashion and with beauty, which we deal a lot in. It's like, listen, you can have this fantastic product that somebody, a Kardashian, says this is fantastic and it's going to fly off the shelf.
Yeah.
But if it's still in production or it's still on a container, you're in trouble.
Right.
So we do kind of that whole fear thing. If the sales thing is put the customer in a hole, but then give them a ladder to help them get out. And that is a big part of what we do.
And what do you look for in salespeople?
For me personally, I've always tried to look for people that are great networkers.
Yeah.
Because I think that, for me, we built, and I kind of built the company's customer base in the UK, particularly from scratch. So it was on me, and it was pretty scary for the first few years.
I bet.
It was.
You're right.
It was. Yeah. It was really scary, and I look back on it now and think, wow. I look back at the younger myself and think that was a really stupid thing to do. But I look for people that know how to network and know how to make their business network work for them, because that to me is the most valuable thing. It really is. It's the thing that if we drew a DNA chart of our top 20 customers, we didn't really close those from a cold call or whatever. These came, they were referred, and we still needed to do the work, but they were already quite warm. And I like salespeople that can do that. And I like salespeople that are, like everyone does, Brian, that are driven, and really just have they want to get deals. They want to put stuff over the line. That to me is that's still the buzz. Even today, that's still a massive buzz for me, is getting the deals,
Now, let's talk about that networking part, because I think a lot of people don't work on it until they need it.
Right.
And that's not networking.
No, it's all the time. We call it your ecosystem. Your ecosystem of who you've got around you. It can help you so much. I mean, I've just had sitting here, obviously waiting for us to chat, and one of my contacts who I've known for 12 years called me and said, "Listen, this company that we both know he works for and I work for, they are massively unhappy with the incumbent that does the other bit of the business you don't do. You're going to get a call in the next 2 hours and they want you to be in there a week on Thursday. They need a plan." And he's got nothing to gain. There's nothing for him in that fight. Nothing other than, I will give him something back
Right.
eventually. Now, it might be in a week, it might be in a year,
Right.
but
That's what people don't get
that's what
is,
people don't get.
yeah,
And you know, you never burn a bridge. And you always try to leave, you know, even if things don't work out, you try to leave on good terms, because those people become your, if you like, your resellers, and they become your evangelists of your business.
right. And I think that ecosystem strategy has been incredibly successful for me. You know,
Yes, has it?
well, I'd sell, enterprise software,
Right.
but they don't buy just my product.
No.
You know, back in the day, they bought hardware till they buy a cloud service, and then there's a
Right.
stack,
Right. Okay.
and they got recruiters and consultants. And
Yeah.
what end up happening is they all need jobs, they all need
Yeah.
work, they all
Yeah.
need references.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just your
Absolutely.
example of being able to network and to keep it alive, not just only call them when you need something.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because I have someone like that in my network who only ever calls me when he wants something.
Yeah.
And he's now, and it's been years, and it was actually my wife pointed it out to me about 3 months ago, and she said, you know, he only ever calls you when he's in trouble.
Yeah.
And I'd never even dropped that penny, hadn't dropped, Brian, to be honest.
Yeah.
But you need to treat, I think you need to treat your network like prospects. You know, you need to keep them warm, and they're generally people you like to hang out with anyway.
Right.
We've got a big rugby international on Sunday, England Ireland, and actually a couple of the guys and girls that are coming are from my business personal network, with their wives and husband and my wife, because to me that's like a customer. You know,
Right.
none of them have got logistics spend, but their businesses are all connected to supply chain and can plug me in, you know, and do plug me in, you know.
That's it, because you're expanding your tribe, and then all of a
That's
sudden their
the
tribe
tribe.
is
That's the
right.
word. I love that word, tribe. That's it.
Yeah, because we are mammals,
Right. We
and
are.
right, and mammals are very
Yes.
tribal creatures.
Yes,
You,
it's
you see it
true.
everywhere: sports, politics,
Yeah.
companies,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it is that giving that sets the seed to you be able to get something eventually.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely. And we've been very good at using, it's interesting, we're going through a change with our business at the moment in terms of how we manage our, I won't bore you with the details, but our gateway offices, the big offices in the US, like the LAs, New Yorks, Chicago's. And we're investing a lot of time in sales resources in those markets. And one of the things that we're talking about is the transference of how we do things, particularly in the UK, to be quite good at getting business. And one of those things is that network ecosystem.
yeah,
You know, everyone needs to build that. And that means if you've got 5 or 6 sales reps working out of LA or Chicago or wherever, they've all got their own network ecosystems. So that means that's multiplied by 5 or 6, and then they've all got 10 or 12 companies. So that becomes quite powerful. And
yeah,
people, I think, sometimes don't understand that, and it can be even competitors. And I've definitely got, you know, some. And in our industry, we're quite lucky that you can have competitors that are very special in certain industries
yeah.
that we wouldn't touch, and vice versa. So if you get an opportunity that comes along that just isn't for you, rather than just say to the customer or prospect,
Right.
it's not for me, I generally encourage my guys to say, listen, it's not for me, but I know someone that might be able to help you, because that will generally come back in spades.
Yeah, if not from your competitor, certainly from your client, because
Absolutely.
they want to solve the problem.
Absolutely.
And if you're helping
Absolutely.
them, uh, as great salespeople, you want to help solve the real problem,
That's it.
even if it's
That's it.
not you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And,
Yeah,
and the whole thing about, you know, the type of salespeople, people that are inquisitive are always
curiosity. Yeah,
curiosity. Why? Why does it work like that? And we've got a guy that joined us in December, and he is the ultimate. He's so inquisitive. I think it drives a few of my guys nuts, because he is. But I'm like, I love that about him. He asks the questions that other people would say, I'm not asking that. I think I'd be a bit stupid. But he actually
yeah.
asks it and then writes it down and understands it. I like it. You know?
Well, that's the first step of empathy. You can't really be empathetic if you're not curious about what the other person's going through.
Right. Absolutely. No, absolutely true.
And how do you get to the real issue if you're not curious what the real issue is?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. You really, and that's the whole thing about, stop selling, start helping,
Yeah.
because you want to help people. Tell me and that's how I've always sold is, listen, and I always use the phrase, so if you had a clean sheet of paper, what would your supply chain look like? What would it be?
Yeah.
Because that's the easiest. People say, okay, well, if I didn't have any price restrictions, I didn't have any, and then you can start to peel those back and say, well, if I could make that go away,
Yeah.
what about this and what about that? And that's always been a favorite lead for me, because it always, I think, prospects don't feel threatened. They're like, okay, well,
Right.
actually,
Yeah. Because they don't want
I'd
to
love to
talk
tell
about
you.
your service until they know why they need your service.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I think that ability to have clients want to talk with you
Yes.
instead of have to, or only when they
Sure.
need to.
Yes. Yeah. Because generally, if they need you, generally they need something, and then that
Something.
puts you in the commodity box,
The
right?
transaction.
The
Yeah.
transaction. They need, I need somebody, so I'm going to do an RFP or RFQ. And I heard again on one of your other podcasts about one of the other gents that you'd interviewed said, I'm all about trying to circumvent or get to the deal before the RFQ and RFP. And that
Yeah.
for us is totally the same. I'm always saying to my guys, they're like, well, we're going to get on the RFP. And I'm like, no, stop that happening.
It's too
Let's
late.
do this. It's too late. If we get
Right.
an RFP, we're finished, because then we get put in the box with the DHLs and the Kuehne Nagels and the people
Right.
that we can't really compete with because they're cheaper than us.
Right.
And unless the customer sees the value, they're going to go with the cheapest.
Yeah. And what other skills or talents or abilities do you like in a sales rep?
Um, I mean, I think the inquisitive thing is
Huge.
really is really huge for me.
Yeah.
I think it's not a it's an English word from soccer, but it's called bounce back ability.
Yeah.
The ability to not get, the times as a sales manager you put your arm around someone and say, nearly but not quite. I like the guy or the girl that says, okay, I'm done, I'm on to the next one. Because
Yeah.
I'm ruthless. I'm like, if they say no, God, they're dead to me, right? I'm done. Right. I am. I'm like, I don't mean that badly, you know what I mean? But I'm like, okay, I'm not feeling upset. I'm just moving on to the next one. They've made their decision for the right reason. It's too late for a steward's inquiry. We move on. So
Yeah.
I like salespeople that have got that attribute that say, you know what, you win some, you lose some. And I guess I'm a little bit old fashioned in as much as I just think that, the harder you work, the luckier you get. That old adage, I think it was that Gary Player that said that,
Yeah.
and I do think that to a degree, activity can drive results, and we don't target any of our salespeople on number of meetings we don't do that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about from a UK business perspective, and globally we don't really do it. But certainly in the UK, I've never done it. Everything is results driven, and if you can hit your numbers and then some by doing 2 meetings a week and playing golf the rest of the week,
Right.
knock yourself
Yeah.
out.
Right.
Because it's a results business. But I also find that there's that's a bit of a kind of a common ground between activity and doing deals. There has to be an element of that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you can certainly coach to activity or
Yeah.
a number of things, but when you make it a KPI, that becomes the game instead of the revenue.
Exactly. Yes,
Right.
exactly. It's interesting. We just set up a new global CRM. We had a global CRM, but it was pretty poor. We got rid of it. We've gone on to a new one. And we had a big debate with the guys in the US about, call count and all of this stuff. And I'm like, boys, just stop it.
Right.
Just we don't need that. It's all about revenue. It's all about gross profit. It's all about margin
Yes.
and growth, not about how many people they see, because then
Right.
it ends up being they'll go
They
and
game
visit
it.
their aunt, and they'll game it. They'll put it in. They go and visit their aunt, put it in as a sales call. That's no good to us.
Right. And then you'll end up with a nice looking dashboard and no revenue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's all pretty colors, but there's no money. Yes,
You want
just
the green coming
I
out.
want the people that have got the money, not that don't worry about the dashboard. You know.
Yeah. How did you develop the bounce back characteristic? Were you an athlete, or were you?
Yeah, it came from soccer, from teams that were what they were in the Premier League, but
Yeah.
they every year they'd get relegated to the first division, which is the next tier down. And the same teams year in, year out, there's probably about 5 or 6 teams that bounced between the Premier League, lower echelons, and the
Yep.
Championship. And the teams that would drop down, they'd always talk about, have they got bounce back ability? You
Yep.
know, can they get back up again next year, or are they going to sink further? Which you see with, I think, salespeople, that
The
they
downward
can
spiral.
the downward spiral, and then you're like, wow, I didn't see that coming. I thought he or she would bounce straight back, but they didn't. Not
Yeah.
getting that deal crushed them, and now they're drifting away. You know.
Yeah, that's crazy because, like, in the US, we have this thing called a performance plan. So, like, the C
Mm,
players with the low performers would get,
right,
30 to 90 days to bounce back.
right,
But pretty much it was just an HR thing to marginalize them out,
right.
because I very
Yeah,
rarely saw anybody bounce back from that.
yeah, really, yeah.
How do you tell, like in an interview, before you hire
Mm.
them, before you see them hit adversity, whether they have this characteristic or not?
I've been really the way I've interviewed has generally been the same from years, and I don't think that I've generally we've been successful in. Obviously, we've got a growth business, so generally we've been quite successful about the salespeople we've recruited. But I've always felt that some of those questions, some of that approach has been a little bit more luck than judgment, Brian, to be honest, and gut feeling, and how you sell is maybe how you buy. What we have done in the last 2 years is we've bought in 3 years. We've bought in a piece of a platform. We asked them to ask a few questions called Culture Index (CI). I'm sure you're familiar with it.
Yep.
And we asked them to complete a culture index, which basically tells us what their focuses on, their traits and their behaviors.
Yep.
So from that, we can get a good, I can generally get a good steer on what type of traits they actually have versus the behaviors they think they have to have at work. And you can generally work out what type of character they're going to be. Listen, it's not bulletproof,
No.
but it's definitely helped us. And we've only made, I would say in the UK, we've probably only made one proper howler on recruitment in the last probably 4 or 5 years in sales,
Yeah.
which isn't, but we don't have a lot. We have, in the UK, we have 10 inside sales and 7 enterprise. So that's not we're a $200 million business in the UK.
Wow.
It's not a lot of salespeople, really. It's not,
Yeah.
but the enterprise guys are all really good.
Yep.
And generally they are pretty bulletproof. They deliver, they're highly incentivized, and they are, they're really part of the fabric of the business. But I'd say it's taken us that long, from 2004 when we started. So we've really been kind of cooking on gas since probably 2015.
Yep.
Where we literally are flying, and I feel like if we were an aircraft, the trim is perfect. We're at the optimal altitude, and
Nice.
we're doing it really nicely. But it's taken us a long time, and
Yeah.
we've obviously kissed some frogs on the way, right?
And what separates the very best, the top 10% from the rest?
I think and I can only talk because I've only ever done it in supply chain and logistics. Being able to tell the customer a story,
Yeah.
and building them a solution. And again, obviously it goes hand in hand, and it's everything that I guess you talk about. Another on the B2B side, it is trust and a connection with the customer.
Yeah.
That they're the ones that can build that connection with the customer, and the customer knows that if I put my company's kind of, blood vein, if you like, that passes around my body to you, is this all going to fall over? Am I going to, because for the buyer, it's all about what they look like. What do they look like?
Yeah.
And we are the guys and girls that can make the customer look good and keep telling the customer how good we make them look. That they're the ones that I think are good. And we've got, of our 7 enterprise guys and girls in the UK, I think they're all capable of doing that at the right time. I really do.
Yeah.
But it's taken us that long to build that team who are all capable of doing that. But rather than just trying to sell them a solution, whereas they've not listened to what the problem is.
And what you really emphasize there is about how they would look good.
Yes.
Not just how good you ship stuff.
No.
Or
we ship stuff. We have a saying in logistics, we all cook with water, right?
Yeah.
We use the same planes, the same trucks, the same ships as everybody else. In the London area where our head office is, there are 9,000 companies in a 12-mile radius that do what we do.
Right.
From a one-man band up to DHL.
Yeah.
Right?
So if you focus on who you are and what you do, who cares? You got to focus on how to make them as individuals successful within the company.
And then that builds trust, and then they know that they can bring to you. And then what happens is, and this is how we've been very successful, is they leave, but they don't leave the world, the planet. They end up leaving
next door. Yeah.
They go to a company that instead of making pink shoes makes red shoes. Yeah. Or instead of making mascara makes lipstick or whatever. And then they ring up and they say, hey, you know what you did for us for their 5 years, could you come do that for us here now? And that has been, if you look at our DNA of where our customers came from, I'd say we've had an awful lot of that, of success, of people saying, or maybe somebody who was the number 2 moving out and then becoming some number 1 somewhere else and then taking us with them.
That's it. Because I think today there's too much focus on the best pitch or the best insight or the best consulting, instead of how do you make the customer successful, not as just as a company, but as individuals. Because that is what a relationship is based off of.
Yeah, and it goes back to the networking thing and your ecosystem of, you want the people you like hanging out with, you want them to be successful, you want them to have a great business, and I love the guys that are guys and girls in my ecosystem. They're all, some of them have got really successful businesses, some of them kind of haven't, but they know a few people, but you want to push something back to them. And it's the same with prospects. When you meet people that you get on with and you like, and you think, I actually really want to help this person because they've definitely got a problem. Whereas if it's, here's my RFQ, here's what we ship this to from,
right,
give us your best price. We generally don't engage in those, Brian, because
the likelihood is so small. Yeah.
The likelihood is so small. And because it started off from when we started the company, we had such limited resources because sales was pretty much me. I would only focus on the stuff that I knew I'd get a return on.
Yes.
So if it was, here's an RFQ for, £1 million a year of spend, but I don't know them, but here's the RFQ. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that.
Right.
I don't know anybody there. Why would I do that?
It's just work. You're just calling.
It's just work.
It's just practice, work.
Right? It's just
with
practice.
No pay. Yeah.
No, with no pay. Yeah. Well, that was a saying that my old company CEO used to say, we don't need the practice. And it's a very good saying. And I reuse it a lot when some people come to us and say, I want to do this RFQ, I want to participate in this. I'm like, guys, we don't need the practice. We can do this stuff.
Right.
Let's only do the stuff where we know we're going to make an impact for the customer and for us.
That's it, because I think that's always been a superpower of great salespeople, is hyper focus and what you call ruthlessness with your time.
Ruthless. Yeah.
Because as a rep or as a salesperson or even any entrepreneur, that's all you have is time.
That's all you've got.
You can't buy more.
It. No. And you can't, and I've learned that along especially having my own business and when we started the company, because your time becomes very precious in that regard. And, as you get older, and as I said, I'm definitely getting old, 50.
Just tell me about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to be, I want to be at home you know, I don't want to be sitting in the office at 8:30 at night doing an RFQ for something I know I'm never going to get.
Yeah, right.
And now we don't. We are ruthless, and I try to push that message to the whole team. And it doesn't mean you're arrogant,
No.
and it's not. We've had that where people say, well, that's just being arrogant. It's like, no, it's not. It's being kind. It's being
Right.
nice. It's by saying, listen, we love you. You're a great guy, but this isn't for us. But let's
Yeah.
have a beer next time you're in town.
Right.
You know, because you never know. He might end up going somewhere, which
Somewhere
is what I'm
else
always thinking.
where it does
Somewhere
match.
else that is a fit, you know.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, this has been a
Yeah.
great conversation. Where can people go to follow you and connect with you?
Usual LinkedIn.
Yep.
I'm on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest place. And obviously the email, david.emerson@zecologistics.com.